my name is Raylan Pickup, and I am doing the film review. Welcome back to the Late Night Show with your host, Raylan Pickup. Tonight's special is gonna knock your socks off. Get ready for the one, the only, Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. Now, if you have not seen it, don't worry, I'll spoil it for you. You're welcome. Hashtag, sorry, not sorry. Anyway, this movie is too good not to share, so let's get right into it. Directed by Hans-Jürgen Poland and written by Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, full of depth and detail, is truly a masterpiece and genius. The narrative structure of Things Fall Apart follows a cyclical pattern that chronicles Okonkwo's youth in Umuofia, his 7-year exile in Mbanta, and his eventual return home. The movie's 3 transitional parts also map onto a gender narrative structure that follows Okonkwo from fatherland to motherland right back to fatherland. This gender narrative structure functions in counterpoint with Okonkwo's ongoing obsession with his own masculinity. Despite every attempt to gain status and become an exemplar of traditional Igbo masculinity, Okonkwo suffers from a feeling of relentless emasculation. Okonkwo's struggle to achieve recognition repeatedly draws him into a conflict with his community, eventually leading both to his own downfall and to that of Umuofia and the 9 villages. The movie first reveals to us Okonkwo, played by Johnny Seka, a wealthy and respected warrior of the Umuofia clan in Nigeria. He is haunted by the actions of Unoka, played by Sonny Oti, his cowardly and spendthrift father, who died in disrepute, leaving many village depths unsettled. I mean, talk about go out with a bang. In response, Okonkwo became a clansman, a warrior, a father, and a farmer. His 12-year-old son, Nyoye, played by the young Boniface Afoko, whom he finds lazy and worries that Nyoye will end up a failure just like his father. In a settlement with the neighboring tribe, Umuofia wins a virgin and a 15-year-old boy. Okonkwo takes this boy, whose name is Ikemefuna, played by the young Carrie Andrew Yaya, and finds an ideal son in him. Nyoye likewise forms a strong attachment to this newcomer. Despite his fondness for Ikemefuna, and despite the fact that the boy begins to call him, and I quote, father, Okonkwo does not let himself show any affection to this boy at all. During the week of peace, Okonkwo accuses his youngest wife, Ojiogo, played by Iyabo Abuaba, of negligence. He severely beats her, breaking the peace of the sacred week. He makes some sacrifices to show his repentance, but he has shocked his community irreparably. Ikemefuna stays with Okonkwo's family for 3 years. Nyoye looks up to him as an older brother, and, much to Okonkwo's pleasure, he develops a more masculine attitude. One day, the locusts come to Umuofia, and the village excitedly collects all of them because they are good to eat. I would eat them. Anyway, Egbuefi Ezuedu, played by Gab Fagber, is a respected village elder who informs Okonkwo in private that the oracle has said that Ikemefuna must be killed. He tells Okonkwo that because Ikemefuna calls him father, Okonkwo should not take part in the boy's death. Later that day, however, Okonkwo lies to Ikemefuna, telling him that they must return him to his home village. Nyoye, however, bursts into tears, knowing the truth of it all. As he walks with his men to Umuofia, Ikemefuna thinks about seeing his mother again. After several hours of walking, Some of Okonkwo's clansmen attack the boy with machetes. Ikemefuna runs to Okonkwo for help. But Okonkwo, who doesn't wish to look weak in front of his fellow tribesmen, cuts the boy down despite the oracle's admonishment. When Okonkwo returns home, Noyoye deduces that his friend is dead. Okonkwo sinks into a depression after that, neither able to sleep nor eat. He visits his friend Obierka, played by Orlando Martins, and begins to feel revived a bit. Okonkwo's daughter Ezinima, played by the young Elizabeth of Toro, falls ill later in the book, but she recovers after Okonkwo gathers leaves for her medicine, like a good father would. The death of Ogbuefi Ezueru is announced to the surrounding villagers by means of ikwe, a musical instrument in Nigeria. Okonkwo feels guilty because the last time Ezueru visited him was to warn him against taking part in Ikemefuna's death. After Ogbuefi Ezueru's large and elaborate funeral, men beat drums and fire their guns. Tragedy compounds upon itself when Okonkwo's gun explodes and kills Ogbuefi Ezueru's 16-year-old boy. Because killing a clansman is a crime against the Earth Goddess, Okonkwo must take his family into exile for 7 years in order to atone. He gathers his most valuable belongings and takes his family to his mother natal village, Mbanta. The men from the Ogbuefi Ezueru's quarter burn Okonkwo's buildings and kill his animals to cleanse the village of his sin. Part 1 of Things Fall Apart emphasizes Okonkwo's coming to age and his attempts to distance himself from the disreputable legacy of his father, Unoka. Okonkwo's tireless efforts and singular drive, along with his local fame as a wrestling champion, go a long way in securing him a place among the title men of Umofia. Yet Okonkwo's zeal frequently leads him astray, as when he executes Ikemefuna. When the clan elders decide it is time for Ikemefuna's execution, an elder named Ogbuefi Ezueru warns Okonkwo that he should, and I quote, not bear a hand in his death. Despite this warning, however, a moment of panic ultimately drives Okonkwo to bring his machete down onto his surrogate son, and I quote, he was afraid of being weak. At other points in Part 1, Okonkwo shows himself quick to anger with his wives and short in patience with his children. His obsession with upward mobility and transitional masculinity tends to alienate others, leaving him in a precarious social position. Part 1 also provides a broad view of the pre-colonial Igbo culture world. Echebe and Poland showcase numerous of Igbo culture in the world. By the end of Part 1, however, both Okonkwo's life and the life of his community teeter on the brink of disaster. The first blow comes from the death of Ogbuefi Ezueru, the oldest man in the village, and the same man who warned Okonkwo of killing Ikemefuna. And the second blow comes from when, during Ezueru's nighttime burial, Okonkwo's gun misfires and kills Ezueru's 16-year-old son. The ominous manslaughter of Ezueru's son forces the remaining village elders to burn Okonkwo's hut, kill his livestock, and send him and his family into exile for 7 years. I mean, what bad karma. In Part 2 of the movie, Okonkwo's kinsmen, especially his uncle, Echuendu, played by Morgan Freeman, I mean, what a great casting, receive him warmly. They help him build a new compound of huts and lend him yam seeds to start a new farm. Although he is bitterly disappointed at this misfortune, Okonkwo reconciles himself to life in his motherland. Soon afterwards, 6 missionaries travel to Mbanta. Through an interpreter named Mr. Kiaga, the missionaries' leader, Mr. Brown, played by Michael J. Davis, speaks to the villagers. He tells them that their gods are false and that worshiping more than one god is idolatrous. But the villagers don't really understand how the Holy Trinity can be accepted as one god. Although this aim is to convert the residents of Umofia to Christianity, Mr. Brown does not allow his followers to antagonize the clan at all. Mr. Brown grows ill and is soon replaced by Reverend James Smith, played by Brian Smith. I mean, what are the odds of that? An intelligent and intolerant and strict man. The most zealous converts are relieved to be free of Mr. Brown's policy of restraint. One such convert, named Enoch, dares to unmask the Iguagu during the annual ceremony to honor the earth deity, an act equivalent to killing an ancestral spirit. The next day, Iguagu burn Enoch's compound and Reverend Smith's church to the ground. The district commissioner, played by Lawrence Fishburne, is upset by the burning of the church and requests that the leaders of Umofia meet with him. Once they are gathered, however, the leaders are handcuffed and thrown into jail, where they suffer insults and physical abuse. After the prisoners are released, however, the clansmen hold a meeting during which 5 court messengers approach and order the clansmen to desist. Expecting his fellow clan members to join him in uprising, Okonkwo kills their leader with his machete. When the crowd allows the other messengers to escape, Okonkwo realizes that his clan is not willing to go to war, which is so infuriating for Okonkwo. When the district commissioner arrives at Okonkwo's compound, he finds that Okonkwo has hanged himself. Obiorka and his friends lead the commissioner to the body, and Obiorka explains that suicide is a grave sin, and therefore none of Okonkwo's clansmen may touch his body at all, or even give him a proper burial. By the time Okonkwo and his family leave Mbanta, the growing presence of foreigners in Umofia has already created a deep internal divisions. In addition to the missionaries who arrive in his absence, government officials also begin to filter in, installing a foreign rule of law. The changes in Umofia compromise Okonkwo's homecoming, which he hoped would represent a new start for himself. Finding himself once again in a passive, emasculating position, Okonkwo grows increasingly furious with his fellow Umofians, who refuse to take violent action against the missionaries and force them out. Whereas others praise the British for their providing increasing access to resources such as medicine and education, Okonkwo sees the British as a cancer, whose presence will eventually kill Umofia and the 9 clans. Following another emasculating incident where colonial officers throw Okonkwo and others in jail and set a steep bail, Okonkwo takes an uncompromising position in favor of tradition. His final acts of violence, murder and suicide, cement the book's the book too, but the book and the movie's tragedy. This tragedy is, once again, deeply gendered. In the law of Umofia, an intentional killing constitutes a masculine crime, although Igbo culture and tradition does not explicitly code suicide as a feminine crime, killing himself is an unspeakable act that strips Okonkwo of all honor. Thus, his suicide brings a final instance of emasculation, which he will be denied of honor of a proper burial. The movie, as well as the book, emphasizes themes of struggle between tradition and change, varying interpretations of masculinity, colonization, family, religion, and fate and free will. The movie showcases many symbols as well. Two of the main symbols are locusts and fire. The locusts symbolize the white colonists descending upon the Africans, seeming to augur good but actually portending some troublesome encounters, as I have mentioned with the missionaries. The fire epitomizes Okonkwo's nature. He is fierce yet destructive. All in all, I believe that Things Fall Apart is such a triumph of a movie and a book. For everyone watching, I recommend this movie for its real voice of all the colonized people who go through the same situation and almost the same experience. This movie really leaves its blueprints on the minds of the watchers. Those who watch the movie metaphorically experience what it's like to be living in Nigeria during that imperialistic time, where change appropriates on their land. That change, unifying the quality of various characters in the novel, revolves around the identity of personal beliefs as an individual in society. This movie leaves you in contemplation and reflection of the theme of change, not just in others' lives, but our own. The director did a wonderful casting, with Sika as Okonkwo being a perfect match, let me just say. Sika portrayed Okonkwo perfectly, right down to the facial expressions. I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better casting. So, next Friday night, when you have nothing to do, watch Things Fall Apart. I promise you, this is an experience you will not forget. Tune in to you next time. Braylon out.